So Bleacher Report did me a solid by giving me some content while we wait for the NBA to come back, and it's actually inspired me to think of some all-decade videos in the upcoming whatever. But for right now, they did their all-decade various things. Their MVP of the decade was LeBron. I think that's fair. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that one. We'll just move on. Defensive Player of the Decade. They gave it to Draymond. I think this one's interesting. If we look at the candidates here, you have to start with the Defensive Players of the Year for each of the 10 years of the decade. Dwight Howard, Tyson Chandler, Marc Gasol, Joakim Noah, Kawhi, Draymond, and Gobert. Okay. I think among that group, you're looking at Kawhi and Draymond as the top two. You know, with Gobert, it's still the question of can he defend at the highest level deep in the playoffs. With Dwight, I think it's the fact that he didn't do it for the whole decade like he did it in the first 2 years of the decade. I mean, we remember Dwight. By the time he was in Houston, he was noticeably a worse player, even if he was still, above average and occasionally really good defensively. Marc Gasol, I think Gasol is on the list of guys who were good defensively basically the whole decade. I mean, maybe the first couple years he didn't totally come into his own defensively, but definitely since about, his Defensive Player of the Year season, which is 2013, and probably like 1 year before that, all the way to now, Marc Gasol's been awesome on defense. Tyson Chandler, to me, fell off kind of fast compared to other guys defensively here. I think Joakim Noah, we could say that for as well. So to me, again, when we're looking at the Defensive Player of the Year, winners of the decade exclusively, I think it's Draymond and Kawhi in their own group. If we move past strictly Defensive Player of the Year winners and we look at other guys, I think you're looking at Chris Paul and Tony Allen if we had to pick a couple of guards. If we're going to think about the wing positions, to me the other one would be Iguodala. He doesn't have as many all-defense appearances as he really should. Like, to me, Iguodala, especially when he was younger and he brought it, more than just in the conference finals, I would have him as a better defender than Jimmy Butler, Paul George, Patrick Beverley, whoever you want to put. I mean, in this scenario, we're talking about basically him when he was 26 in Philadelphia all the way till this season with Miami. I just think Iguodala was always, in terms of hardware, was severely underrated as a defensive player. Like, he only has 2 all-defense appearances, and to me, there's competition there, don't get me wrong. I mean, LeBron certainly had some great defensive years in the early part of the decade, and, there's other guys, and the case against Iguodala would be, well, he didn't bring in the regular season all the time once he got to Golden State. That's fair. But even so, I feel like he's been a little buried in this conversation. I would also like to point out that he was robbed of several Sixth Man of the Year awards after his first year in Golden State. Let's see, I'm trying to think of anybody else. Did I mention Anthony Davis? Have I mentioned Giannis? Although for Giannis, it was more the back half of the decade. Yeah, anyway, I do think it still comes down to Kawhi and Draymond. I think Draymond is the pick. Kawhi robbed him of definitely one of his Defensive Player of the Years, which would have been 2015. Kawhi played 64 games that year, and Draymond played 79. And as for 2016, where Kawhi won it, I think Draymond was definitely the better defender that year too. Like, again, I know people don't like Draymond Green, but I mean, the guy's a revolutionary defensive player, and he probably should have won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, if we're being honest. Now, does that mean that I just basically said that Kawhi deserves its 0 Defensive Player of the Year wins? Yeah, pretty much, but I'm not saying that because I think Kawhi is overrated defensively. I'm saying that because there was another guy who was better. Not only that, but I think you could make a case that Kawhi got robbed in other years for the award. I do think it's interesting to compare Draymond and Kawhi defensively, like looking past the awards and stuff. Kawhi, probably better one-on-one, better perimeter defender and stuff. Although Draymond, very good in that regard anyway. But Draymond, better team defender. And when you can put a guy at center who can defend all 5 positions, call me crazy, but I think that puts you over the top. And again, I think he deserved way more than 1 Defensive Player of the Year award. Best team of the decade, Bleacher Report had the Warriors. I don't think there's an argument against them, really. Maybe if you try hard enough, but I'm not going to. This one was interesting. The best playoff series. Now, they went with the 2016 finals, and it's got a strong case, but the thing with the 2016 finals, while, of course, we remember the ending and the 3-1 comeback and all that, the watchability of that series game to game, in terms of just the pure basketball, was not always the best. A lot of blowouts. Now, the spectacle of the series was incredible. I mean, seeing what we believed to be the best team of all time going up against LeBron, and LeBron and Kyrie just putting up wild games and everything, and coming back was nuts. But in terms of, the games themselves, a lot of blowouts. I mean, technically speaking, the only close game of the series was Game 7. Everything else was at least 10 points or so. I mean, Game 4 was an 11-point game, so okay, but yeah, it was really just the Game 7, and I mean, that game was so nuts, and I can remember the last, we'll get into this. There's a best game category, and I'm basically just making the case for this game now. The last, 7 minutes of that series are legit the most gut-wrenching minutes I've ever spent watching a basketball game. But even then, it was a whole bunch of missed shots, and a couple of crazy defensive plays and all that. So if it wasn't going to be that series, the 2016 finals, I think you're looking at the 2010 finals. As a Celtics fan, it hurts because they lost, but in terms of, being objective, it was a really good 7-game series. It was back and forth the entire time. The Celtics stole Game 2 in LA, Lakers steal Game 3 in Boston. And then, of course, Game 7 was great as well. The 2013 finals certainly need to be brought up here. This is the best game, in my opinion. I'll just get ahead of it now. Game 6 of the 2013 NBA Finals. If that's not the best basketball game ever played, I don't know what the hell is. You can make your case for Warriors, Thunder, Game 6, Klay Thompson, 1,000,000 threes. The Heat were dead, and I don't know how the hell they came back by 5 points in the last 30 seconds, but they did. I mean, LeBron made a 3, there were some missed free throws, there was the craziest shot of all time. However, with the 2013 finals, a lot of blowouts there too. Game 1, 6, and 7 were close. Games 2 through 5, all blowouts. Well, Game 5 was a 10-point game. Yeah, I think I'm going to still go with the 2010 finals. Maybe it's just because I'm a Celtics fan and it does a little bit for me. But, they lost the series and I'm still picking it. It was just objectively a great series with two really good teams that knew each other's tendencies and they just went back and forth the entire time. Coach of the decade, Greg Popovich. So, this one's interesting. In terms of accolades, Steve Kerr's got it over Pop. But in terms of just knowing who is the best coach, it is Pop. So I'm kind of fine with that one. Also, I still feel like Steve Kerr has had questionable coaching moments. He threw Anderson Varejao into Game 7 of the finals. What was that? I don't know. He's also had other random things of starting a game with Damian Jones or there's other weird things that Steve Kerr did along the way. He did some smart things too, but I don't know. Maybe he still gets it because Popovich hasn't been as awesome the past couple of seasons. You can argue, well, is it the roster? Is it him? Don't know. But he also probably had the most fun team. Well, the most fun team is pick any Warriors team you want. But the 2014 Spurs, the best passing team I've ever seen. And the way that they just dismantled Miami's defense. That series was over by midway of Game 3, I believe. Although I would like to say, the LeBron fan in me would like to point out, Game 1, LeBron got cramps. Game 2, Miami won. I'm just saying. Could have been a little different if some things bounced away. But even so, the Spurs were so dominant midway through that series, I feel like they would have won it anyway. And then they have the trade of the decade, the James Harden to Houston trade. It is tough to argue with that one. The only other one to think about could be the Pacers trading Kawhi to the Spurs in 2011. If anything, because that trade at least makes up most of the decade. There's other trades that have been big. The Anthony Davis trade was huge. It also happened in 2019, 1 year. Or technically a couple of months, because, it's mainly just been this season. Yeah, I mean, the Harden trade, it drastically impacted two teams, one in the positive, one in the negative. It's tough to have a choice over that one. The last one is the signing of the decade. That one's got to be LeBron, I assume. It would be between LeBron and KD. The thing with LeBron is I feel like you got two different choices. You've got the Miami signing, and you've also got going back to Cleveland. Now, in terms of the impact it made on the league, yeah, it's certainly the decision, as it's been known. Because now the way that we look at player transactions and free agency and, guys, I don't know if forcing your way out of a team is the right word, but you know what I mean. Not to say that never happened before the decision, but it happens a lot more since the decision occurred, so, yeah.